Hey, what's going on everyone? Greg here, and Apple just finished wrapping up their annual Worldwide Developers Conference. WWDC 2020 is over, and all of this hype leading up to the event, I don't even know what to say at this point. The event for me was really good and delivered on a lot of key features that I have personally wanted to see across a lot of Apple's platforms, including iOS 14, iPadOS 14, watchOS 7, and now macOS 11? macOS 11 is coming. Or I guess now the official name, macOS Big Sur. Now for this video, I want to go over my initial reactions of WWDC 2020. Now usually I would be a lot more thorough and detailed in this video, but I want to try something new and give you my raw impressions just after watching the event. And I am going to go over some of my favorite features with everything that Apple announced today, including the big transition over to their own A-series chips for the Mac. It has finally happened. As you can tell, I'm pretty excited for all of this stuff. And don't worry if I didn't cover everything in this video. I'm gonna have a lot of videos throughout the entire week covering almost everything that Apple announced at WWDC, including some previews of those developer betas, which should be hitting very shortly. So I'm gonna go in show order here and start with what Apple showed off first, and that was iOS 14. And let me tell you, the updates here were a lot bigger than I was expecting, especially with things having to do with the home screen and also some other additional features. Now, a lot of these initial changes have to do with the appearance of iOS 14 in general and have to do with different views of the home screen as well as the addition of widgets. First of all, iOS 14 is adding what they're calling a new app library view. And this will help organizing all of your apps. Of course, one of the leaks that happened this year was that Apple would be adding widgets into iOS 14, and we got just that, and they look really great. So you can customize widgets on the home screen and place them in different views, and you can also adjust the size of widgets. Your apps will automatically move out of the way to make room for widgets, which you can also drag and drop from the Today view. So basically now you can put really useful information on the iOS 14 home screen. So for example, you can add a weather widget to keep constant updates on the weather, or you can add a calendar widget so you can always keep up to date on all of your appointments. These new list views and organization views look really cool, and the widgets especially. It is a fresh new look to Apple's iOS home screen, which really hasn't changed all that much ever since the original version of iOS. So I am super excited to actually get the beta and play through with all of this different customization. Now, another big change that I really liked in iOS 14 was the addition of picture-in-picture, and shout outs to my buddy Viper. He has been waiting for this forever, as I have as well, and we finally got it. Now, we don't get split screen multitasking, but we do get the ability to do picture-in-picture, and it looks very similar to how it operates on the iPad. Another thing I really liked with iOS 14 was what they were doing with messages, having a lot more features for an app that I think a lot of iPhone users spend a ton of time in. So now you can respond to messages in threads, you can also mention people, and you can also pin messages to the top so you don't lose track of conversations. Another really interesting change I was excited for with iOS 14 was this new apps clip feature, which actually doesn't require you to have an app downloaded on your phone to use, and it won't take up app space on your phone. And this is basically a really small app. The max size for it is 10 megabytes. And basically when you go to say something like a store, say you're going to Starbucks to order coffee, Starbucks could incorporate this kind of app into their system, either through a QR code or through an NFC tag. And when you go over to Starbucks, it would just quickly download a 10 megabyte app file onto your phone so you can quickly use features like ordering through the mobile application. The main reason why I'm excited for this is this apps clip feature is a pretty big change in the paradigm of how we traditionally think about our iPhones and the way that we use apps. I know for me, example, I don't really spend that much time on the Yelp app, but for the few times that I've had to open it, I've had to go in and download the app in order to make reservations at certain restaurants. So now with something like this app clip feature, I could go to the restaurant, and then when I'm waiting to check to see if my table is ahead in reservation, I probably won't actually have to download the app. That's a huge thing, and I hope a lot of stores actually adopt this sort of feature because it seems like a really seamless experience. Again, I don't have any hands-on with it, but it's one of those features that I thought was pretty exciting. Now, iOS 14 did include a lot of other changes that didn't really thrill me as much as the previous ones I mentioned. There's updates to Maps, there's the ability to use your iPhone as a car key, there's some other updates to the App Store, and a bunch of other changes it looks like they didn't go over on stage. But like I said, we have too much to cover in this video, so let's move on to the iPadOS section. Now, of course, iPadOS is going to be borrowing a lot of the same features as iOS 14, including additional features to the home screen like the widget section. One of the bigger changes was a new sidebar feature, which really makes it feel more like a Mac rather than an iPad. So now you have a new sidebar in apps like Photos, Notes, and Music. And you can even drag and drop items from the sidebar into different apps. The sidebar is really focused on taking advantage of the big iPad screens that we have, where before you just got a really big app view. So these sidebar features should help in not only navigating the user interface on iPad, but also helping us be more productive by getting our work done faster. Now, iPadOS seemed to be a lot lighter on feature changes from iOS 14, but there was some other cool additional things that I did get excited for. One of the things was the way that Siri has changed, which apparently is also going to apply to iOS 14. So now Siri no longer takes up the full screen when you activate a Siri request. And on iPadOS, when you're using Siri, you'll also get the additional feature of having that bigger display space. So for example, in the bottom right corner, if you were to add something to reminders, you would see a reminders view pop up on your iPad's display. This also carries over to phone calls as well. No longer will phone calls take up the entirety of your iPad's display, and you will get a nice little notification that comes down from the notification center, and then you can choose to answer or hang up the call from there. This will not only work for phone calls, but will also work for other third-party apps like Skype. There's also now universal search to help make search easier, and some new additional Apple Pencil features. So now you can handwrite in any text field, and it will be able to convert text. This works across multiple apps, and you can even handwrite in a Safari search field, and it will convert it to text. Honestly, the updates to iPadOS didn't seem that major. I think last year was a much bigger year for iPad, but there were some nice little quality of life improvements that I really liked. However, I was disappointed by no mention of Pro apps coming over to the iPad Pro. I was really hoping to see a version of Final Cut Pro 10 running on the iPad, but maybe next year, and I'll get to that a little bit at the end of the video. Now, real quick before we move on to watchOS 7, and that's AirPods. AirPods are actually getting a software update in the form of AirPods Pro, which are now going to support a spatial audio system. This thing really impressed me. I didn't know that the AirPods Pro were going to get even better over a software update. So now Apple is claiming that AirPods Pro will be able to support things like Dolby Atmos, so you can better pinpoint where sound is coming from. And the reason why I got super excited for this feature was just because I really wasn't expecting them to improve AirPods Pro via software, but I'm glad to see it considering they do cost a big amount of money. Now, one of the bigger changes to AirPods Pro besides this spatial audio system was the fact that the AirPods will now automatically switch across all of your Apple devices. So before, the AirPods could automatically sync to all your devices, but you always had to go and tap the AirPods in Control Center or in the Bluetooth settings to actually switch over. Now Apple is able to just automatically detect which device you're using and intelligently switch the AirPods over to that device. This is going to be a huge thing and a huge convenience for those of us who are heavily invested into the Apple ecosystem. And this is one of those features I just can't wait to try out. Okay, let's move on to watchOS 7 highlights. Now again, I think watchOS 7 overall, there weren't too many things that actually got me all that excited. There's going to be some new watch faces, like a chronograph watch face with a tachymeter like we covered before, and a new extra large watch face. You'll also be able to share watch faces more easily with friends, and you can find them now on websites in the App Store, and you can also make your own watch faces with the existing complications and then share them with friends and family. There's also some additional workouts, so now you can get a super accurate dance workout, a functional strength training workout, and also a handy cool down workout to let you cool down your heart rate. Now, there was two big software additions that I really did like with watchOS 7. The first one was the ability to use multiple complications from the same app on a watch face. So now if you wanted to view different weather data points, you can actually now all see that on the same watch face and kind of get this super detailed view of all weather. They also showed off an example of a Nike watch face where it was giving all these different data points from the Nike app. I just think this is really cool because it was one of those things that I personally didn't think about having, and now that you can actually set these apps up with these really detailed views, it's almost like the number of different watch faces and options you can have changed, even though there's still no support for third-party watch faces. The second biggest software feature that I'm super excited to try out is the sleep tracking feature on watchOS 7. So there was a lot of rumors before that sleep tracking was coming to the Apple Watch, but we weren't sure if it was going to require dedicated hardware or just be built in through software. Well, it appears that it's just going to be built in through software and be available on any watch that gets watchOS 7. So basically now you can go to sleep and track your sleep very accurately with the Apple Watch. The Apple Watch display will also turn off when you activate sleep mode. And then when you tap the display when it's in sleep mode, it will show a very dim display that won't hurt your eyes. There's also a useful good morning screen when you wake up, which has some very important data metrics from when you were sleeping, and will also include things like your battery level indicator to indicate that you should probably charge your watch before you head out in the morning. Sleep tracking was one of the key missing health features that Apple Watch didn't have, and a lot of its competitors did. So now that it is natively built on the Apple Watch, that is just another addition to the amazing device that we are wearing on our wrist. Oh, and they also added in a hand washing indicator, so it lets you know that you've been washing your hands for 20 seconds. Personally, I think the more beneficial app would be to alert us when someone didn't wash their hands as they walk out of the bathroom. Apple could have sounded a nice big Apple Watch alarm and shame all those people. I'm just kidding, but really? Do you really need an app to remind you how long you're supposed to wash your hands for? Now, I'm going to skip some parts of the keynote. Again, remember, this isn't a super detailed video. I want to talk about the things I'm more interested in, but Apple did have some nice sections here on privacy, on tvOS, and also some other updates coming to the Home app. But let's move on to one of my favorite sections of this presentation, macOS Big Sur. Which, by the way, I feel like this is just the weirdest name ever. macOS Big Sur. I can't believe they're naming it that. But you know what? I think it's kind of funny in a way, so I guess I'll take it. And macOS Big Sur is changing the design of the Mac's operating system a lot more than I thought it would. So there's a lot of new design elements, like changes to the overall app icons, additions of transparency in certain applications, new sidebar space and more efficient toolbar space, new glyph icons and new colors, changes to the menu bar to make items more spaced out, and also really big additions like Control Center on the Mac, and you'll have the ability to drag and drop things from Control Center right into the menu bar, a better notification center, which will now offer a better view and also get some of those notifications and widgets that we just recently saw on iOS 14. And you also have the ability to add those different size class widgets from small, medium, and large. The best way that I can describe this design change is that macOS is starting to look a lot more like the iPad with iPadOS. A lot of the design changes really look like it's more like an iPad rather than a traditional Mac. Now, obviously I got to get my hands and play around with this software first, but at first glance, I do like these changes. It makes the Mac look a lot more modern than it looked just a day ago. However, if those changes in making it more modern somehow make usability suffer, that's not going to be a good thing for macOS, as macOS tends to be one of the more productive platforms, at least it is for me. There's also a lot of other changes, like new versions of Messages and Maps, which are running on macOS Catalyst. So Messages now includes better search, a photo picker, Memoji, and also message effects, just like its iOS counterpart. Apple has also done a revised version of Maps as well, adding in most of the changes that are coming over from iOS 14. Apple is also doubling down on Catalyst, not only making it easier for developers to bring over their iPad apps over to the Mac, but also giving them even more options once they do so. There's also a surprising number of improvements to Safari. Now, Safari can see if your passwords are compromised. You can also easily bring extensions over from other web browsers, and also a new extension section in the App Store. There's also a privacy report for extensions, a customizable start page, customizable tabs, and native translation built inside of Safari. Apple is even claiming that Safari is 50% faster than Chrome and also more energy efficient. Now, even though I really liked a lot of the design changes with macOS Big Sur, that wasn't even the biggest macOS announcement today. The biggest macOS announcement today is that Apple is finally confirming that they are beginning the transition of moving away from Intel chips over to their own custom A-series ARM processors, the same ones that they use on the iPhone and on the iPad. Apple even showed all the demos today running off a Mac that has an A12Z chip. That's the same exact chip that is in the latest 2020 iPad Pro. To say this is a big moment for the Mac is an understatement. This is a huge transition that's going to require a lot of work, not only from Apple, but also from third-party developers. This is a move that Apple wouldn't make unless they were committed to the future of the Mac platform. In fact, Apple has all of their native applications ready, including their Pro applications like Final Cut Pro 10 and Logic Pro 10, already running natively on this A12Z chip. Now, Apple is trying to make it as easy as possible for existing apps to be recompiled in Xcode, and Apple is claiming that they can recompile in just a matter of days. Apple already showed off some partners already committed to taking their apps over from Intel and porting them over to Apple's A-series chips, and that included developers like Microsoft with Microsoft Office and Adobe with their Creative Cloud production suite. Apple is also including a translation layer called Rosetta 2. Apple is promising very fast emulation on Rosetta 2. Furthermore, Apple is saying now that they can use their own A-series chips inside of the Mac, that you will be able to run any iPhone or iPad app on your Mac. They even showed off some demos of these iPhone apps running in an iPhone window style view, and it was just really interesting to see. This is something we've heard Apple was working on for a long time, trying to unify these platforms so they could eventually just make one universal app to work across all their platforms. And this is a big milestone towards that. There are so many different apps that run on iPhone and iPad, and they look like they're going to be all fully compatible with the Mac, which is just going to grow the Mac's software base by so much when this is finally ready for consumers. A lot of us who cover Apple have been waiting for this transition for a long time now. It's become increasingly apparent that Apple's own A-series chips are outscoring Intel not only in power, but also in power efficiency, meaning that future Macs will gain in performance as well in things as battery life, and don't forget thermal performance. And yeah, I totally got it wrong. There was no hardware announcements at WWDC this year. However, Apple did something kind of unprecedented and confirmed that they are still working on Macs. They confirmed that there's going to be some more Intel Macs coming out later this year, and they're also going to introduce their first A-series Mac by the end of 2020. That is a huge confirmation. A lot of us weren't expecting an ARM Mac until 2021, and Apple is saying it will be here by the end of this year. So I can't wait to see what that product is and what that product looks like. Now, even though there wasn't new hardware for consumers at WWDC, there was new hardware for developers. This takes place in the form of a Mac Mini developer transition kit. Developers can apply to get this Mac Mini, and Apple will begin shipping them out in weeks. This Mac Mini will be running with 16 gigabytes of RAM and running on Apple's A12Z chip, again, the same one found in the 2020 iPad Pro. And hey, I'm in the Apple Developer Beta program, and even though I've never made an app myself, can I apply for this and get an ARM Mac Mini shipped to me in a couple weeks? If I can, I'm going to be super happy. If I can't, I totally understand. I probably couldn't cover it in a video anyway. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of legal stuff in there, and I really don't want to mess with Tim Apple right now. He's got the eye of the tiger. But anyway, as I'm sure you can tell, I am super excited for this ARM transition. Apple will finally have even more control of the Mac platform through their own hardware chips. We can think of Macs today like the MacBook Air and MacBook Pro, and I think they would be much better off with Apple's own custom silicon. We probably wouldn't have them heat up as much, and we probably wouldn't have those loud fan noises, and we would certainly have much better battery life. And like we mentioned before, now that Apple has all of their apps running on the A12Z, including Final Cut Pro 10, I also think by next WWDC, we should also get a working version of Final Cut Pro 10 that's made for the iPad, and that would be super cool to see. Apple says they plan to fully transition to their own A-series chips in just 2 years. So the first ARM Mac is shipping again at the end of this year, and then by the end of 2 years, every single Mac that Apple sells will be based on their own custom silicon. And I'm just trying to think here of an iMac powered by an A-series chip and how powerful that's going to be. And I'm also looking there at the Mac Pro, that $6,000 starting cost desktop that they just shipped. And I'm just imagining what sort of crazy custom Apple chip are they going to put into that tower. And whoo boy, it's a very exciting time for the Mac, and it's a very exciting time to cover this stuff for Apple. So if you like this video, I really hope you did. Again, I know I wasn't super detailed and super thorough in this, but I just wanted to cover a lot of the things that I was interested in. So if you like the video, make sure you give me a like. If you want to see more from my channel, make sure you're subscribed. If you want to support the channel out in any way, make sure you check out some of the links in the description. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Take care, everyone.